719 by David Arbisi. Chapter 1. The Hole. Clutching his side, his eyes struggling to open, he pushed himself up onto his knees. Again, a heavy blow from the leaden pipe brought him down once more. The blows repeated until his swollen eyes closed, the room quickly fading to black as his face hit the gravel. The eerie sound of a distant music echoed around the tiny, dirty cell. As if being ripped from a dream, the pain splashed like a fire across his chest. This time, he was looking at a swinging light, facing upwards as the blows rained down on his semi-conscious self. Black and white rag. That was the music playing. Then a hard, calloused fist came hurtling towards his face, and again his world faded to black. The beatings were a regular occurrence for 719. Some days he would be visited 3 times, others not at all. His bones had become accustomed to the torrent of blows, and sometimes he didn't even feel the pain. For him, he had known nothing else in the world. For as long as 719 could remember, he had been there, wherever there was. Without a name he could remember, he was a number, 719. Waking up to the sound of distant country music, 719 looked around his cell. How long have I been out this time? He thought to himself. A day? 2 maybe. It didn't matter anyhow. The plan was set and he was going to see it through no matter what happened. Looking across the rusty bars to the opposite cell, 719 pursed his lips. Making a low whistle through a cupped hand, he waited for the reply. 83 put his face to the browned and flaky bars. I thought they'd gone and killed you, he said in a hushed whisper. You've been out for 3 days. You should know better than that. Not one of those bastards is ever going to kill me. He hooked his head to the right, pushing his eyes close to the bar to look down the corridor. Then he reversed it and looked the other way. So are we ready? He said. Well, the guard changes tonight, so it gotta be then. You gotta waste your time going and falling asleep for days. He chuckled through a toothless mouth. 83 was an old man. Many a decade had passed him by in that dirty cell. Grey bristles protruded from nearly every orifice, and his long, twisted mane swished when he talked. His hands were old but strong, and his crippled back could still hold the weight of another man half his age. The boys are ready, but it's lucky you woken up. If you hadn't, we'd had to wait another 12 cycles, he said as a muffled whistle came from further down the corridor. Both men drew back immediately from the rusted bars as the guard walked by, swinging a large bunch of keys like it were a bag of sweets. He strode by 719, peering in as he passed. His footsteps echoed along the stone floor until he reached the corner and the stairs to the level below. Clicking his heels with every step, he made his way down the stairs and headed off in the other direction. The guards were a constant and unpredictable threat for all the prisoners, and especially 719 and 83's carefully laid plans. They would often burst into a cell and mercilessly beat a man, sometimes with pipes, other times with whips, or fists, or boots, or knees, or elbows. Many died, but no one cared. No one ever came looking for them. 719 didn't even know where he was, which also seemed to be the case for the other prisoners. No crime had they committed. Well, not that they could remember. He couldn't even remember how long he'd been there. It was an awful place, where no light penetrated. What world lay beyond the walls, he didn't know, but he knew that one day he would find out no matter what. Well, tonight it is, said 719. I'll let the others know. Just be ready by the 7th click. He paused. Oh, and for God's sake, don't be going and getting yourself knocked out again, or we'll be in a world of shit, he muttered as he sank back into the darkness of his cell to compose his secret message. Written in more of a jumbled array of shapes and muddled letters, 83's code resembled more a child's scribbles than a script of any kind. But without education, it was the prisoner's own language, and one the guards couldn't decipher, even if they were lucky enough to intercept any correspondence. Shortly after he finished, he made a clicking sound with his mouth. 3 long clicks, then 2 short, quickly followed by 2 long. After a few moments, Mighty scurried out of a tiny hole along the scummy floor and into his lap. Mighty was 83's closest friend and ally. He was a tiny mottled brown dormouse. After gently caressing the rodent, 83 attached the tiny message to the underside of Mighty, and with 2 squeak-like clicks sent him off, scurrying through the tiny crack he once emerged. It would be some time before 83 received a reply, so he lay back against the cold floor and drifted off to sleep. 719 was also trying to sleep, but the ache that covered his whole body and the rasping snore from 83 kept him wide awake. He lay there for hours pondering their plan. He went over the strategy over and over again, looking for weaknesses of any kind, any shortcomings, but he could find none. This plan had to work, or they would all die trying. It was years in the making, and every man knew his role. He was just drifting asleep when a low, soft whistle broke his thoughts. "Nearly 7 clicks," whispered 83. "Okay, everything's set? Is everyone ready?" "They are, my friend. When we are in the yard, we'll pounce. I can barely wait," he said, exhaling all the years of abuse and pain with each thought of freedom. As if on cue, the 7th thud clicked on the intercom speakers, followed shortly by shouts from the guards. The cell doors opened with a groaning scrape of metal on metal and swung back in unison. The prisoners knew the drill and began filing out into lines along the railings. 83 looked across the platform to 719 with a knowing smile and wink. He turned and began his shuffle-like walk down the corridor to the steps. The walls and railings and stairs were the same as the cells. The metal had rusted badly and the concrete walls were damp, with mould and stalactites adorning the corners and ceilings. The light was dim, casting long shadows between lamps, which gave the whole place an even more sinister glow. Cries and screams of pain and despair echoed along the sodden walls from the other quadrants of the prison complex. It was a huge facility, broken into 4 main sections or wings. One for the normal convicts, one for the criminally insane, even though 719 was sure they were no different from the others. One section was the infirmary, and the other was used for the rapists and child molesters. It was a hellish place, but every one of the condemned protested their innocence. However, sometimes the place itself, coupled with the constant beatings, turned the innocent into depraved and vicious beasts that were surely suited to such an awful place. They formed gangs and ruled the prison in more of a barbaric way than the guards. The more intelligent of the prisoners, like 719 and 83, stayed clear of the gangs, keeping themselves to themselves, and either through dumb luck or clever pacts they avoided the main threats. 719, however, had an even more effective weapon for keeping away unwanted gangs. Being a favourite of 1020, that was a huge advantage. 1020 was the most feared gang leader in the whole prison, and was treated more like a king than a prisoner. Guards knocked down the walls of 3 cells to give him a larger room. It was decorated with a large mattress, hung materials and curtains, and many shelves lined the walls. They contained hundreds of books and magazines, even though 1020 could not read. He was a huge man, nearly 7 foot tall, with shoulders and biceps to match his colossal frame. His skin was as black as the night, and he kept his beard trimmed tightly to his chin. His eyes remained fierce black pools wherever he looked. Even when laughing, they terrified the bravest of men. 719 had gained his favour many cycles ago. 1020 had been cornered in an attempted assassination by a rival gang. He survived, killing them all, but a poisoned shank had sunk deep into his leg during the fight. With no guards due for many hours, he thought he would die. 719 was the only man in the cell block able to read the old language, and was brought to him. The cells were always locked, but like a king in his castle, 1020 knew how to get what he wanted. Amongst many of his books was a medical encyclopedia. Using this, 719 managed to discover an antidote for the simple prison-brewed poison. 1020 had many supplies, some stolen, some gained, and some given by the guards, and with them 719 had managed to create the remedy, saving his life. Bizarrely, 1020's appreciation for doing so was to have 5 men beat 719 senseless. For 5 days this happened, 1 day for each man. Blows rained down harder than any of the guards' beatings, until he lay there, unconscious in his blood, urine and feces. He rose the next day only to receive the punishing onslaught again. On the 5th night, 1020 came to him and lifted 719's limp body onto his legs. He gripped his shoulders and shouted to the cell block.
719 is mine. He is mine for life. An ally, a friend, a healer. Touch him and your death will be a slow one.
He then looked at 719 with those dark, penetrating eyes and laughed, releasing his grip on his shoulder and letting his body fall limply to the floor. From that moment on, he was a made man and had gained a great deal of respect. Most people kept their distance, and this suited him perfectly. It was a horrible initiation, but one that granted him the iconic status of 1020's right-hand man, and he gained the nickname Healer. 1020 was about 20 places down the trail of men. 719 looked back, and the knowing glances exchanged said everything it needed to. They silently made their way down the stairs and through the twisting complex of corridors and cell blocks. They passed the infirmary wing and approached the yard. It wasn't really a yard, more a huge room. It had a basketball hoop at one end and some weights by the entrance. It had high walls that adorned barbed spikes, and a domed ceiling covered the whole space, settling meters away in the ground on the other sides of the walls. It gave the impression of an outside space, but it wasn't. It was a daunting spectacle, and one that greeted each convict as they unfortunately entered the prison. The far end of the yard had two huge, twin iron gates jutting out of the domed roof. It was the only way in and out of the complex, but in between the prisoners and the entrance were 3 sets of spike gates, an ancient-like drawbridge over a pit of sludge and spikes, and 2 small sentry towers. They were linked by an arching walkway that stretched around the whole yard, just above and just out of reach of the spiked walls. Guards patrolled the walkway, constantly keeping a vigil on the prisoners below. Once every 7th day, the convicts were brought out to the yard for exercise. 2 hours was all they got before they were herded back to their cells. 2 hours, however, was more than enough today. 719 and 83 were the first to reach the weights.
"We've had word from the outside.
Everything is ready," said 83, picking up the lightest of the dumbbells. "Good. On the 8th click we go. 1020 and I will be at the first gate. Are the others ready?"
They are. We've been ready for many cycles. And now's the time, my boy,"
he said, looking at 719.
"Eyes up.
Here it comes."
And here we are, ready for war and freedom,
whispered 1020, anxiety and ruthlessness mixed in his voice.
They are few and we are many. Today we will face them together on the battlefield. In a click's time, we will be free or dead. Either will be a release.
1020 laughed and slunk away from their group as quietly as he approached. "Good luck, old man. I'll see you on the other side," said 719, and he too withdrew from the small group and walked slowly toward the gated entrance. The 8th click thudded through the intercom, and the guards were rising to change shift when a huge explosion rocked the complex. Fire spilled into the infirmary from the improvised device. It filled the rooms like a liquid, consuming all that attempted to flee. Seconds later, another massive explosion rocked the prison. This time, however, the guards' chambers and the armory disintegrated. The massive force of heat and debris crushed those that were there and crippled others that were nearby. The alarm started blaring, and a few of the guards on the watchtowers and walkways began shouting orders at the prisoners. Chaos ensued, and the men that knew nothing of the escape played their part perfectly. Seizing their moment, they began to riot. Guards were dragged to the ground and bludgeoned with weights and makeshift weapons, their blood and cries adding to the mayhem around them. Others charged the towers and walls. With their bodies and muscles hardened over the years of punishment, the prisoners quickly scaled the heights, helping others over to avoid the barbed spikes. Like ants ascending a tree, they moved quickly and effortlessly, avoiding the water cannons and rubber bullets from the guards. With dust and debris falling from the roof as smaller explosions and aftershocks rocked the yard, a group of men gathered at the base of the larger tower.
"No!"
screamed 1020 as he slapped a tar-covered piece of material to the outer wall of the tower. A small wick protruding burst alight, and a fizzing spark quickly ran its length. The men jumped away and ducked round the sides of the tower.
3, 2...
Boom! The device exploded before 1020 finished counting.
It didn't even get to 1! You complete fool!
He slapped a man next to him to the ground as he and 719 jumped through the dusty, smoke-filled hole. They pounced upon 2 guards that were scrambling for the rifles and submachine guns in the cabinet behind them, killing them quickly with rocks and shanks.
You see that?
He squawked.
That fool nearly got me blown up!
Shame he didn't make the fuse any shorter. Then I could have been rid of you for good. 719 laughed as he pulled the homemade knife out of the guard's throat.
Rid of me? After all the love and kindness I've shown you over the cycles.
He laughed a demonic laugh.
Brother, you shall never be rid of me.
Standing over the dead guards, laughing in his trademark deep boom and covered with arterial spray and dust, 1020's eyes glowed fiercely. 719 couldn't help think he wasn't born of this world. He was more like one of the ancient warriors, one he'd read about in the prison books. Shaking his head clear of the mental image, he grabbed one of the guns and darted up the spiral stairs with the others right behind him. 719 launched himself over the railing at the top and dropped the few guards with a rat-a-tat attack from the rifle. Their bodies slumped onto the floor and blood started to pool around them. Looking across at the other tower, he could see the convicts seize control. He raised his fist and brought it down quickly and waited for the same gestured reply. When he got it, he took a moment to survey the yard below. Men were still bludgeoning guards and seeking their own personal revenge, but mostly it was over. The guards had no chance and were quickly and swiftly dealt with. Smoke was slowly seeping into the yard from the ongoing fires within the complex, and the screams of those trapped inside drifted surreally to his ears. 719 blocked out the sights and sounds, for there was much more to be done. Now listen, we haven't got long till the other guards stop piling into the yard. Once that happens, if we are not out of here, we will never leave this place. We have 2 gates to scale, and right now the other tower is lowering the drawbridge. We need to get 83 and the others, and then close these gates. We can't let others come. They will have to slow the guards down, or we won't have time. 719 glanced over the edge of the tower and motioned for the small group, including 83, to move towards the first gate. It slowly began to creak open, but upon seeing this, a group of the other convicts began screaming and running towards the gate. 1020! Open fire! Stop him from getting through! Shouted 719 as he grabbed his gun, pressing the butt against his shoulder. Bullets erupted, ripping into the soft flesh of the oncoming men. Hearing this, more started the advance against the tower, just as guards, heavily laden in riot gear, started pouring through the entrance at the other end. Rather than face the bullets, they stormed towards the guards and the fighting intensified. Shit! They're so much earlier than I had expected.
So it is not just a fuse that was cut short.
I guess not, said 719 as he watched the last of the small group rush through the opening. He turned quickly, yanking down the lever for the first gate. Time to go! He shouted as he and the others headed back down the stairs and into the first section. They bolted the door and rushed towards the outer gate, waiting for it to start its opening sequence. The hinges began to squeak as the huge gate started moving, but all of a sudden it jolted forward and then stopped abruptly, having opened merely an inch.
Why isn't it opening?
Shouted 1020 up to the other tower. Their confused faces and rushed gestures gave little confidence. It's stuck! It's stuck down there! Shouted one man from above.
Shit! 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 Not now!
Shouted 1020 through the furor. It's okay! We still have time! We'll fix it!
719, listen! The fight is nearly over. And when it is, either the guards or the rapists or the murderers will be on us. We don't have time!
He barked. With all his strength, 1020 ran at the gate. With his weight behind him, he bashed into the door with his shoulder. Others quickly followed suit, and the gate jolted forwards, and then it jarred backwards. Again and again the men rushed the gate, charging and retreating, and slowly the gate creaked open. The noise of the fighting in the yard, however, had ceased, and predictably the guards had won. The sound of rioting and shouting was replaced by that of barking orders and banging on the bolted door.
Now open! Now! God damn you!
Screamed 1020 as he and the other men charged the gate one last time. The huge iron door gave way under a huge crack like that of a whip. The men, unprepared for it giving way, tumbled to the floor and skidded to the foot of the bridge. One unlucky man tumbled straight into the spike-laden moat, impaling himself. His body slowly slid down the spike until his tortured cries submerged in the brown sludgy water. "Quick! The bridge! Get to positions!" shouted 719 as he ran to the turnstile-like cog. He and 2 other men began pushing it round and round as 1020 and 2 others did the same to the mirrored cog. The bridge creaked and moaned as the chains slowly released their grip, lowering the bridge with a thud onto the far embankment. Upon seeing the gate come crashing down, the small band of escapees rushed over the moulding wooden planks. 719 was the first to reach the other side. In front of him were 2 huge iron doors that stood 20 feet tall and looked like they had been taken from an ancient military bunker. These would not open, but that didn't matter. There was a small door about 30 meters on the left, which led to a small control room and an exit out of the hull. A single key card was required, the one 83 had stolen from the warden earlier that morning. 83 was the last to cross the bridge. After starting the release, the cogs automatically began turning and pulling the drawbridge back up. 83 staggered to the edge, but was halted. 719 looked back to see 1020 holding 83 by the collar of his tattered, bright blue prison skivvies. Snatching the key card from his crippled hand, he landed a heavy blow to the side of 83's head, sending him sprawling backwards onto the ascending bridge. He scrambled to the edge, leaping out to grab at the embankment, but he was met with a heavy kick. He sunk back, clutching the gushing wound to his head. From 719's vantage point, he could see the old man slump and slide back along the halfway drawn bridge. 719's heart was racing, his thoughts wild. He screamed, but his shouts were drowned by the eruption of bullets. The guards had broken through the makeshift blockade, and 1020 and his boys opened fire, buying but a few minutes. 719 screamed again as he lurched towards 1020, tackling him to the ground. A fury of punches struck him in the jaw and eye, but the dark, penetrating eyes were alight with pleasure. 1020 landed a crunching uppercut which sent 719 flying towards the moat. He smashed into one of the other convicts, throwing him into the death pit. Through bloodshot eyes and choked with emotion, 719 screamed, "Why? Why did you betray him?" He coughed the last words out as he winced from his bruised jaw.
He was old. He would have slowed us down. Better he be put to good use and keep the guards away for a little longer,
he said through gritted black teeth.
But without him, this would never have happened!
Healer, you think that I care? I want out, and I will do anything to get it.
The guards had reached the bridge, and a blood-curdling scream rang through the air. "Run! Go now! Save yourself!" 83's words were cut short as a flurry of bullets erupted from behind the wooden bridge. Immediately, the bridge began to lower, and the men darted towards the single door.
This is not over, 1020.
719 looked at him, with vengeance in his eyes, as they reached the door. He watched as his sinewy, tight black skin seemed to dance in the dim light, sweat beads making trails down his blue overalls, and his dark eyes burning fiercely with the sheer excitement of the escape.